Okay, anybody want to go first? I have my agenda with it, but we can go wherever you want to on this. And I don't know where I put my book. Anyway, what can you share? I'm taking notes. I have my notes, but I'm taking notes on top of that. Why don't we start with Pauline, and then we'll go.
Okay, I know we always say it's kind of interesting, but I did find this interesting, like the effects that nature had on all of the people that were in Africa, like actually, like part of it was, like, first off, you're all alone out there in like a place you've never been before, right? And I remember, what was it, skulls on sticks in the room, or was it like actual, like, and I don't know if it's like animal heads, but I thought of horrible flies, because like, obviously, and that, it reminded me of that, once you're more out in nature, you're away from civilization, so you become less civilized, and it's clearly showing for people, you know, so I thought it was cool to have that little connection.
Can you take it just a step further? What was the theme of that book? Do you remember enough about it? And how does that relate? I think it very much relates to the theme of this book.
The theme of Lord of Flies, I think it was just like civilization with nature, and how different the boys became after this, like, crap, and they were all alone, and they just started, you know, going crazy.
Sort of like Kurt's in Africa. Once the restraints are lifted, what are you made of? Where are you gonna gravitate to? That's a very good connection. Then we'll go to Liam and then go back over here.
I thought it was interesting, this was mentioned the first time we had the discussion, but like, basically the self-defense that the land had, which was like the sickness.
Yeah.
That the native people there were fine, but most of the other, like Kurds, even Marlowe, they all got sick. Kurds got sick
Yeah.
multiple times, I'm pretty sure. But I also thought it was interesting narratively that the first part of the book was, it made it clear that it was told from Kurt's perspective in the present, so that during the end of the book, when Marlowe got, or it was told from Marlowe's perspective, when Marlowe got sick, there wasn't, like usually in a story, somebody gets sick or is like dying at the end, you're like, oh, will they survive or not? But in this, there was no tension like the point of him getting sick wasn't to create tension, because you already knew he was gonna live, because he was telling the story. Yeah, Marlowe. So it was more, I think, to symbolize that instead of then to create suspension or to create tension in the story.
So the continent does have its revenge, as we pointed out, and that's a good point. He got it. Somebody made the connection between Kurtz's death by disease, and Marlowe doesn't die, but he does get it. So that connects him with with Kurtz as well. Good. We'll go to Emily and then.
Well, I picked back up obviously on page 106 where we ended off last time, and I immediately enjoyed page 107. I really liked how Marlowe was referring to Kurtz. You know, he was in the shock of his favorite crew member just being killed, and it was so sudden, and all that he can think about is his shoes, and you can really read into his mind and hear and feel his thoughts, and he just seems so scattered. And he's talking about how now he'll never see him, he'll never shake him by the hand, he'll never hear him. And then he realizes that he's kind of boxed Kurtz down into a voice, when really he knows in his heart that he's so much more than that. He's going to be such a large personality despite being so frail with disease. And then in the bottom paragraph, he says, "We are too late, he has vanished, the gift has vanished by means of some spear, arrow, or club." And I thought that was really interesting, how Kurtz became less of a person the more they ventured deeper into the Congo. And that really stood out to me.
I want to come back to that at least Monday, if not today, about, you mentioned he's been, I don't know the word you use, but distilled down to a voice. He's been disembodied. He's now just a voice, not a body. That's really significant. And we can come back to that. It's a really important thing, the voice. Yeah.
It seemed like as the closer they got to the person, the less he was a person in Marlowe's mind.
Oh, that's interesting. Either one of you, we'll go with Will and then we'll go to Courtney.
I just found it interesting how Marlowe kind of acts as a light to Kurtz, because when
light?
Yeah,
Okay.
he kind of, when he went to go look for Kurtz and Kurtz was gone, instead of like sounding an alarm to everybody else, he went and found him himself, and so I think that he had heard all these things, bad things about Kurtz, and how he shouldn't really hang around him or like try and get to know him, because they were trying to get rid of him, and so I think that just shows character, how he took initiative to actually go and hear his side of the story and find out more about him. And I feel like most of the book, we're just kind of hearing Marlowe's thoughts and about the nature surrounding him, but now I feel like there was more character in this part of it, because he was finally taking initiative to get to know someone who everybody else thought was bad. And, I mean, I was surprised at the things that Kurtz did, like with the skulls on the sticks, and trying to get Ivory and make in bad situations, making the situations bad with what he was trying to do to get to Ivory. But I just like, I don't know. I mean, I was surprised that that's how Kurtz did it, but I admire Marlowe for taking the initiative.
And I never thought of that being as significant as it might be, as you point out, that it's Marlowe takes the initiative to rescue Kurtz alone. He didn't ask for help, doesn't ask anybody else to do it, and that's important. Why don't we go to Courtney, and then over there, and we'll come back.
I had a couple of things. I think first, going off of what Liam was saying about the continent having its own kind of defense. I was trying to find where it was that I read this, and I couldn't find it, but I thought it was really interesting when he's talking about how when they're still going down the river before they've gotten to where Kurtz is, they're kind of in this place where he's really uncomfortable, but he notices that the other natives are more comfortable because it's like still their home, even though their home isn't actually there, and it's still, miles away. I thought that was kind of interesting, how he was talking about that a little bit. And then, I was kind of going off of what Willow was saying, I thought it was interesting the way that he was like so determined almost to like Kurtz. I think it's interesting how he examines himself and his reactions to things, like when he thinks that Kurtz is dead. Like Emily was saying, how he's so disappointed that he's not gonna get to hear the voice, and he's like, he hadn't, up until that point, realized that that was how he was looking at it. He hadn't realized how he wanted to hear his voice, until he thought he wasn't going to, and then he could suddenly see like what it was that he wanted from Kurtz. But I think also he wants to like Kurtz so much because it's like people that he doesn't like don't like him, which I thought was I mean, I totally get that feeling where it's like these people are so annoying and you don't like them at all, so this person who they don't like has at least got to be better than they are.
He's the red-eyed devil as opposed to the
Yeah.
flabby devil. They're both devils. There's nothing really, I don't know, there's probably is good about Kurtz, but it's been corrupted pretty much. But still, like you say, he's better than them, and there's something admirable. I mean, it took some skill to do this, and like the voice, that's a gift. Very interesting. Sophia.
Yeah, well, this was at the beginning of the last section we read, but I was just gonna talk about, I thought it was interesting, like Kurtz's, his approach to like treating the natives was very interesting. Like he said, like an approach of they're like supernatural beings to them, and even though these Native Americans didn't necessarily hate them, they kind of looked to them, it's not necessarily adored them, but it was almost like his approach was very manipulative. And I think it was interesting, after we had just read that poem, what was it, like The White Man's Burden, and I think it was kind of opposite, not opposite, it was like similar but opposite approach, because he said that they were like supernatural beings, and that, and he almost wanted to make the Africans feel like they were like gods towards them, but I don't think that they were necessarily like patient like this poem said, so I thought it was interesting how he approached it, in his manipulative way towards them.
Good. That's a spectacular drop, and it just doesn't fall, it bounces all over the place. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. I gotta get back to you. Tell me that last thing.
What'd you say?
Just tell me that last thing that you said, and because there was something I was gonna connect with that?
Oh, I just said like, his approach to the natives was like that they were supernatural beings and the natives were like superior. And so, and then in the poem that we had read, The White Man's Burden, it was talking about how like you have to be patient with them and be, have humility. But I don't think he took that approach. But he did take the approach that it was their burden and that they were definitely superior to the natives.
And before we go to Kinsley, and then we'll go back over here, page 110 and 111, remember his mother, I'm just reading from page 110, talking about Kurtz. This Kurtz had been educated in England. His mother was half English, his father half French. All Europe contributed to the making of Kurtz. And by and by, I learned that most appropriately, the International Society for the Suppression of Customs had entrusted him with making a report for its future guidance. So that topic, the suppression of savage customs, that was, when Kurtz went in, I think he was more like the poem. That was his goal, to win them over, but by the time, the next paragraph on page 111, it says, it's very simple at the end of that moving appeal to every altruistic sentiment it blazed at you, luminous and terrifying, like a flash of lightning in a serene sky. So he wrote this report, and it was very much like that, and then written, I think, and just handwritten at the bottom of it, exterminate all the brutes. So that's the Kurtz you're talking about. That's the Kurtz that we see at the end, one who, and we talked about this, I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but I think the creepiest thing in the book is when the chiefs of other tribes would be forced to crawl in his presence. Isn't there something disgusting about that? Isn't there something obscene? There's nothing, crawling, kids crawl, babies crawl, ninjas crawl, snipers crawl in the army. But when you take that out of those contexts, isn't there something almost obscene about crawling in the presence of a person? And that's how what he had become. He talking about being superior. He wanted you to crawl before him. That's just disgusting. Why is that disgusting? Why is that image wrong? Yeah.
I think it's just like he's put himself up on this pedestal and he wants people to basically worship him.
Yeah.
And it almost makes you feel sick to yourself,
Yeah.
like the way that I don't know if it's the way that he views himself or the way he wants people to view him, but it's like, it just feels so wrong and,
Yeah, it's kind of like that authority that he has.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel right.
Right.
But it's also like he wants people to see this person that to them is their leader and that they respect. He wants them to see that person humiliated.
Yes, it's
So he
utter,
takes it another step.
utterly humiliating. I hadn't forgot about Kinsley, but you want to comment on that?
No, I can go.
Okay, we'll go to Kinsley.
This is kind of what Will was saying, but I feel like everyone else in the book, like, they were either like too scared to talk to Kurtz or they like thought he was so much better than him to like actually like kind of become friends and like talk to them. But then Marlowe, like, he took him, when he ran away, he took him back and like stayed with him until he died. And he even said that he thinks he's a remarkable man. And then like when he died, he told his intended that his last words was her name instead of like the horror, because he like saw the good in him. And so I just like,
Yeah, but there's a big question. Why does he protect? He promises the Russian that he would protect Marlowe's reputation. And Marlowe wanted himself not to be remembered. And he lies to her in order to do that. Wonder what his, and you said he seems to like Kurtz. Why does he like Kurtz? And he must like him enough to lie for him, and he hates to lie. I'm still not quite sure in my mind why he is so attracted to Kurtz. There's something about, although we did say he's the red-eyed devil opposed to the flabby devil. He's the best that they've got. He's certainly not good, but he's, compared to them, he's better. Yeah, Marie.
I just think you could kind of make an argument that Kurtz is the heart of darkness in the book,
Huh.
because when we were talking about the heart of something, that's kind of like the thing that, like the purpose giver type role, and I just think Kurtz gave a lot of people a purpose, like Marlowe had to go
Very good. That's, I just wrote, he gives purpose to others, almost like God does. You know, God is our creator, so that gives us purpose. And so in this godlike, false God, of course, figure of Kurtz, he actually causes people, you live for him, you know, you serve him, and all. That's a really interesting way to put that. Yeah.
So I really liked like the very ending of the book when Marlowe's talking to Kurtz's fiance, and when they're having their whole conversation about, you know, his death. And I just love, like, I'm not gonna read all of it obviously, but like there's like so many different references to how dark it is and how there's shadows in the room and how the only thing in the room is like her lit up face that you can really see clearly and things like that. And they're just constantly talking about how dark it is. And so I think that kind of coincides with what Marie was talking about, how he, like, they're just talking about him, and the more they're talking about him, it's getting darker in the room. and
Yeah.
It's just like consistently getting darker and
Yeah.
darker. And then at the end, he is telling, when she asks Marlo, like, what his last words were, he's like, I can't tell her that, that's just too dark. And so he lies to her. And I just think that whole, like, the last couple of pages really, I guess, sort of like pretty much what Marie was saying too, but like just how they embody how dark Kurtz was and how much like, but even though she doesn't see that, like she's talking about how good of a man he was,
Yeah.
that it's just everything else is pointing to darkness.
Yeah, that's really good analysis. I think it was maybe last year, after all the years I've read it, that I realized what you just said, that the room that he's in is getting darker with her, and of course it ends, the last thing we see him do is lie, which is really a dark thing to do. You know, that's part of it. And look at what's the last word of the entire book? The word darkness. It's certainly not a happy book, but anything you can learn from is true. If it's true, then it doesn't have to be happy. If this does paint a true picture of at least half the story, you know, the dark side of the story. Yeah.
Someone might have already said this, but this is another one of those books where there's not really a good guy, right? Like there's no like morally, like there's no moral high ground that any character has over
All the
others.
King's Men, we said that about.
Because you follow Marlowe, and I was expecting him to be set up as like someone who goes in and sees like this injustice or this darkness or whatever, and then sort of like rejects it, right? But instead he goes and he gets like pulled in by like the intrigue of Kurtz, right? Because everyone's like, you know, saying he's like the best like trapper or whatever that the company has, and that he like is in a league of his own and he's gonna be promoted to like manager or whatever. And then he like, Marlowe is like, he needs to go meet him. And so when he does, instead of like rejecting him and seeing like how bad of a person he is, he like respects him instead, which I thought was kind of strange. And how the way that I was like, this is like a personal thing, I guess, but I was more interested, I wasn't interested in reading all of the book to see like triumph over evil. I was more interested in like seeing the book sort of builds the suspense of like who Kurtz is, right? Because like you don't meet him until the last 20, 30 pages, right? So most of the intrigue of the book is what sort of darkness is it, sort of like what's the evil that you're gonna find with Kurtz, and the fact that Marlowe sees it and doesn't react in the way you expect him to is sort of interesting.
Well, you expressed that really well. In a way, all mysteries involve darkness. You're in the dark. At any point, is anybody ever in the light? You know, they're always in the dark in the sense that they're confused, and the mystery of Kurtz, that's a good, darkness is a good image for that. And are you saying there's hope, there's no hope here, you don't expect Marlowe to kind of give into it when it comes right down. He keeps the darkness in the dark. The true nature of the darkness is still in the dark, because he had the opportunity to shed light on it by telling her, this is what darkness, he was a part of the darkness. Somebody, I don't know if it was in here or last period, pointed out that the book itself is the truth. He never told the truth to Marlowe's girlfriend, but he's telling it to the 4 guys on board the ship. So the darkness is being revealed. So that's hope there. Isn't that interesting how skillfully the author uses this theme of darkness in about every part? Very good. Anything else you want to share? I'm going to share some of it. I don't want to, since you're here, we won't finish this. But it kind of ties together with what we've said. So just a few things, and that I won't finish. I have to finish on Monday, and I know in about 9 minutes we'll have the prayer. Just write some of this down, at least a reference. Page 107 and 108 is when we hear about Kurtz's voice. I guess this would be my contribution to the discussion if I don't get any further. So 107, 109, and somebody we were talking earlier, forgive me if I forget exactly, y'all are really good at that, remembering who said what and saying, well, just to coincide, I forget after a while who said it, but, you know, somebody somewhere talked about, it was Emily, was it you that talked about just he becomes nothing but a voice, okay? And what's the importance of a voice? Why the voice? And what does the voice have to do with this idea of darkness? If Kurtz can be, what's the word I've been trying to, reduced to one thing, he's been reduced to a voice. Why is that significant? He could have been reduced to a hand, he could be reduced to an eye, but why is it that it's a voice? Colleen?
Because the voice doesn't necessarily have to be seen, it's like, you hear it, he doesn't know what direction it's coming from, so it's all around, he doesn't know where to look, I guess.
Good point, yeah.
I think it has something to do with the power that the idea of Kurtz has over them, because to me, our voice is like one of the most powerful things
Yeah.
that you have. I used to have this like recurring nightmare that I couldn't speak, and I'd be, you know, like, I don't know, I would be dying in various different ways, like falling off of something or something like that, and then I actually can't talk, and it's so, you can't scream, or do anything like that. Or I used to also have, like sleep paralysis, which is the thing where you're like kind of awake but not really, and you can't move and you can't speak, but then you're like also like awake, but you're just like hallucinating. It's very bad, it's not fun.
It's something like those dreams that we often have, you
I don't
try to
know
call
what it is.
out and help, but nobody hears
Yeah,
you, you
yeah.
can't articulate.
So, to me, like, if you're reduced to something, like, even just full everything else and no voice, that's like the scariest thing. But also there's something a little bit eerie about just being a voice.
Being only a voice, having no voice versus only a voice. Emily?
Oh, I was going to say that the voice is the most influential part of a person. You know, when Elijah was on the mountain proving that his God was real and that Baal was not, it was a still small voice.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was going to say something else. It's the most influential, and also the voice of evil, the voice of Satan in our lives is very prevalent. And so, talking about the lazy devil and the red-eyed devil, I
Mhm.
thought like that was kind of a reference to
Wow.
those.
What you were saying, I thought I saw another hand, that the importance of a voice, this always comes to mind when we talk about this. Did you ever see the movie, let me think of the name of the movie.
The Breakfast Club.
16
All right, I just have to tell you what it's about. It'll come to me in a minute. But it was about the King of England, Elizabeth's father, George. Is it George? Elizabeth's father, George? The one who
King's
became
Speech.
king.
The King's Speech?
The king, thank you. The one, he became king because his brother, married the American.
He abdicated.
Yes. And so this guy becomes king. Never in the world expected to be king, and he stuttered. And so he has to learn. The whole thing is, if you've seen, the movie? Y'all know about the movie? It's a true story. This is Elizabeth, current queen's father. He had to learn to speak, give speeches. And so the whole movie was about him learning, and it's rated R because there's one scene where he lets go this string of obscenities, of profanities, but it was significant because he didn't stutter when he said them, because whatever psychology or passion or energy was going into saying those words, he needed to transfer them into his normal kind of speaking. But there's a wonderful scene in that movie where this king, the stutterer king, they're watching a newsreel of Adolf Hitler. And if you've ever seen him, how did he win over the thousands and millions of people? He was a spellbinding speaker. And it was like, okay, how are we going to combat the voice? He's got the voice, Hitler, influencing all these people. And almost like a spell, people get in that spell. And we've got a stutterer. And as God always does, he likes to take the Davids and pit them against the Goliaths. And of course, they had Churchill, who made up in a lot of ways for George's inability to speak, although he did conquer that. Churchill was an incredible speaker. But that always, to me, that's so important. It's what are you hearing? What is it that you're hearing? And it's seeing, you mentioned. It's not so much the seeing, but it's the voice. It seems to be the most powerful thing there is. And remember, it's the Word of God. It's not the image of God. We're forbidden of making images of God. So he came across, you obey the Word, not the image. We don't have idols. We don't have pictures of God or statues. We have a Word. So even God recognized the importance of the Word and the voice. And I think it's interesting when we're trying to figure out here what is the heart of darkness. Maybe of all human capacities, it's the voice. Because what was it that Satan did? That he put a gun to Eve's head and said, eat it. What did he do? He said, did he really say you couldn't eat of the fruit of the garden of all of it? No, he knows you would get, he lies. So sin came through lying, not through war. It's a type of war. I just think that's really significant. And we'll stop here, but I just want to share these things on Monday. I'll do that. And then at some point I'll give you the next book, which I know you're eager to get. I know you are. You do like to read. I'm not joking.